Hi everyone. Hope the mic's working. Hope everything's fine. Welcome to those of you that are here. The NGD is doing a transition in markets. We're now going to be giving financial advice instead of talking about Go. Um, no, not really. But I am going to be using some economics analogies. Hi Papa Snack. Hi Baby Shampoo. I'm rather fond of economics myself as an academic subject, so I could make some very convoluted analogies, but I'll spare the audience and make them slightly more simple because I want to actually like help teach you guys. Um. Hi, hi Poonpun, welcome. Thank you and/or me. You're welcome for the follow. Oh, you follow? Nice, thank you. Um. So I changed the analogy. Well, I was going to use an economics analogy for this lecture, like the whole way, but I changed which economics analogy I was going to use like 2 days ago. So I hope this one will go well. I haven't used it very often. I think that the Nordic Dojo that's like Hello World isn't me. It's Antti, my teacher. Also, he runs the Nordic Dojo, which is what this is. Um, But yeah, to start with the lecture, I basically want to start talking about why I care so much about talking about influence and why I think it can help people. Um, a lot of people have trouble evaluating influence. That's the basic premise behind my lecture. And people have a problem evaluating intangible value. So I'll give an example. So um, let's take one of the classic Sansan Josekis. Just this like super simple one, and then you say, well, this is a joseki, so it has to be even. What does white have? Well, white has very clearly these points. These are more or less whites for the rest of the game. Like, I mean, there's some like follow-up josekis where they where white loses this corner, but in general you can assume that that white can keep those points for the moment, because if white really wants to, white can. It's basically white solid cash. Now, what does black have? Well, black has influence. Influence. Um, what does that mean? Um, it's a little bit hard to tell, right? Because with white, like in Go, the point is to make points. So even though you kind of can count and see how valuable white's territory is, you don't really know how valuable black's assets are. And for some psychological reason, I think that's a little bit harder for people in general to deal with. Now, this Joseki you probably aren't very uncomfortable with because you've played it before. Like, all of you, like, probably have played this very simple Sansan Joseki before and are kind of used to it. But generally speaking, people are less comfortable with influence, or at least at evaluating influence. And I hadn't prepared to talk about this, but I might go on a tangent as to why I think that's a slight fallacy of perspective, which you could disagree with. I'd be curious to hear what chat thinks about this. But I just noticed Oscar Vasquez 7 down. Yeah, I couldn't help changing it. I'm now 7 down by rating, so I had to go change that. Yeah. Anyway, so the goal of Go is that by the end of the game, you need to own more of the board than your opponent. That's like the only objective. And while it's easy for white to go, well, I have all of this solid cash. Um, while I have all of this solid cash, well, what does black have? Well, I don't know. So whereas black can be scared that they don't know how much their influence is worth, white could also be scared that they don't know how much black's influence is worth. So if you're the influence player, you can actually use the uncertainty of how valuable your influence is to your advantage. It just depends on how comfortable you are with with this uncertainty. Now, I think that most people I know, actually, or many people I know, tend to assume the uncertainty is a bad thing for them. So a lot of people have problem playing against influence, and a lot of people have problem playing with influence because we don't like uncertainty. Oh, mistakenly put 6 stun in the OGS announcement. That's fine. Yeah. Oh, hi Page Edict. Welcome. So, in any case, I'm going to talk about influence more from the influence player's perspective, and talk about how we can feel okay with uncertainty and how we can evaluate uncertainty to a certain extent, and hopefully that will be helpful. So I cope by saying I have Sente. Yeah. Well, Sente is pretty valuable. We can actually discuss how valuable Sente is because that's relevant in evaluating a lot of these sequences. Like, for example, whenever you evaluate a local result like this, where black has an extra stone, you have to keep in mind that black has an extra stone. That's rather relevant. It's not just a cope. Your coping's valid, Papasnek. So okay, I haven't brought in stock markets yet, and I'm going to by bringing up my first example game. I think I actually put this example in spontaneously. I remember it's from the game of a student of mine from 2 years ago, and I'm wondering if they even remember this game, but it made an impression on me. And I just put it into the lecture last minute because I think it's interesting. And which one is it? Is it this one? Yes, it's this one. So let's go forward a little bit, and I want to show you guys a specific moment in the game. So yeah. So right now, black has this weak group, and white's basically chasing the weak group. White's other group, like over here, is also not super strong, but we'll see how it goes. White sort of has an advantage because white has the supporting stones in this fight. So in general, I'd say black's under attack. And white understands that. White's trying to sort of make that happen. And white's trying to push black in the direction of white's influence until now. So here, I would advocate that if I were white, I want to play K11 instead. And the reasoning is that I'm really strong over here. This seems familiar. Oh, aha, you do remember it, yeah. So I'm really strong over here, where I've marked all of the stones. So if I'm really strong, I want to push my opponent in that direction, so we fight where I'm strong. So that black's group suffers where I'm strong. However, white played from the other direction, and I think that this is very likely due to a slightly different mindset than the one I just described. Can anyone describe it for me? Does anyone want to have a go? Because I think that white betrays a certain mindset here, which we're going to talk about, and this gets exemplified a little bit later in the game as well. While I drink some water. Make profit by attacking, avoid letting black live and getting all the points. Don't drive the opponent into your own moyo. Okay, Papasnek makes a very good summary of it. Don't drive your opponent into your own moyo. There's also a little bit of the I want to attack while making points. So I think that what white was thinking here is, if I play from the outside and black runs in, and maybe white didn't calculate this too strong, like in too much depth. Let's make some like dummy variation example. How would white play here? Maybe like I would push here just to make sure because my shape is a little bit thin. I would even consider pushing again, but okay, let's not. And then I'm going to jump. And then whichever way black goes out, I'm going to jump again. And I'm sort of enjoying this because black has a not quite alive group that black has to solve, and I'm just chilling. Points from strength instead of attacking from strong. Yeah, okay. Kawabung is basically getting at what I want to get at. Yeah. So I sort of enjoy this, but I think white didn't. White wanted the security of making territory. So white's thinking, oh, black has a weak group, let me run it out and make all of this area. And that seems understandable, because say that white attacks from the outside, and let's say black lives somehow. We don't quite know how yet. I mean, living this black group it's definitely possible. It won't die. But man, I would be annoyed to have this group as black. It's sort of difficult to handle, I would argue. But let's say black lives somehow. Then white says, well, look, my territory is smaller, and I want my territory to be bigger. That's the point of territory. So maybe white would say that. And I'm not going to comment on these mindsets for the moment. I'm just going to say that they both exist. I mean, obviously I've betrayed which one I like. I want to drive black into my moyo. But okay, for now white plays J12. Black runs out. And white also has to run out. Incidentally, one disadvantage of going from J12 is that your other group also gets weakened to some relevant extent. So yeah, and this is a curious moment. Black plays J11 and white Tanukis, because I don't know, white thought that Q9 was big. And then black black turned first, I forgot about that. And then we Hane connect. And I thought white's next move was relatively telling, which is why I wanted to talk about this game. Maybe someone can guess. Well, actually, there's two things you can guess. What you think is the right move and what white played. I think they're both interesting guesses. I mostly forgot about this, but I can say J12 would still be my first instinct. I see. Then you've forgotten the lesson we had on this. Or you didn't agree with me, which is fine. You can disagree with me. J12 isn't a bad move. I think I would argue Oscar's disappoint. I mean, not quite. And actually, the moves that white played this game that I'm talking about aren't like terrible moves. They're reasonable. But the reason that this made an impression on me is that I had a lesson with the person in question, and I remember what they said. So I wanted to talk about this way of thinking about influence. So in the game, what white did was play G13. And G13 has a very clear idea. It's like, my points. I want these to be mine. And I think that sort of is congruent with white's decision making earlier. Now, why white didn't Hane here to keep even more territory is slightly beyond me. I'm guessing, I think it's possible that white just thought that the right side was big. That's certainly possible. And the right side is big, so I understand. But the next move I thought was interesting because I think that this is my theory. And this theory, I talked to my student after the game 2 years ago, and he talked about making cash in this area. So from his perspective, this area is white's, and this move is keeping this area as white's. And I think this move is actually not that bad, because, I mean, I still wouldn't play it, but I think it's not that bad. The reason is not points. The reason is that, say I play R4, and say that black plays something like G14. My shape is a little bit thin, so all of these stones are, I would say, are in need of some help. So potentially I need to add a move. What's a good move to add? Like, just here or something? Some defensive move. And you could be annoyed that black can get the exchange in Sente. I still don't think that this is worth adding a move. Like, if we just look at this area, it's a relatively small one. How many points are you keeping? Like, really not many, because in the future, black can always reduce you with this type of peep and attachment, and the whole area just becomes relatively small. Just as, like, quick sample idea. I mean, the black won't do this, but this is what the territory will most likely look like. So you're not keeping that many points, and you're spending a move for it, which is not terrible, but I would say not advisable. And what I found interesting about this particular game is after the game how much white emphasized on that being his territory. And I think that's a very natural thing to do, because territory is how we win games. And it's very easy to just like territory. It's secure, it's tangible. However, I would also advocate that that's not necessarily the right approach to this type of position when you have influence. And that sort of brings me to the first... Well, actually, that doesn't bring me to my first point. I'm going to show another example, which is, I think, much clearer. And then we're going to talk about my stock market analogies. Let's see. Let's find the next game. Is it this one? Yeah, okay. So, this one is a much more recent game. And the beginning of the game isn't that interesting. Or, it is interesting, but not for the purpose of our lecture. And, yeah. The interesting part of the game starts when black plays n3. And n3 is a move that I guess some of you have seen, maybe not all of you. It's a somewhat common joseki. I think it was very popular a few years ago in especially in Korea. Then it got a little bit less popular, then AlphaGo revived it, etc. Auntie, I blame you for n3. n3 is actually a nice move. I think n3 is sort of the right thing to do here. It's a perfectly good move. And the players played some kind of joseki, where black just settles on the lower side, and white gets some influence. And this is fine. I think there's nothing wrong with this for either side. And yeah, we get to talk about this wall of white. And yeah, the long knight's a nice move. Actually, I haven't analyzed this game with too much rigor, but my first instinct is that this is a pretty nice move. It's a nice way to just grab as much ice space on the side of the board and live. But I want to talk about this influence of white's, because white has just traded a bunch of territory on the lower side for a bunch of influence. And it's a little bit unclear whether that's worth it. I mean, on the one hand, black has some points. On the other hand, white has a beautiful, nice wall. On the other hand, how do you use it, right? That's the question that white was probably asking themselves. Parenthetically, this isn't really related to the lecture, but G2 is really big. I'd have a hard time not playing G2 immediately because it's just huge. And very possibly as white, I would have done something different here. F3 is better. F3 is better than G2, possibly. Yeah, possibly F3 is even better. But I like that a lot because when white plays G2, it starts to constrict black's ice space. Yeah. But okay, I don't want to talk too much about G2 because that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about how this influence life develops. And black takes center and plays P6, which is a slightly mean move. You're obviously preparing the O4 cut and pretending that that's threatening. And white actually took a move to settle on the side of the board, which is not unreasonable. And now black plays O14. So I don't want to comment too much on these moves. I don't think every move in the last sequence is optimal, but they're okay. And we get to this position where we still beg the question, what's white going to do with that influence? Is white going to do anything with that influence? And what should white do now? And I want to ask the audience, what would you do now? A little bit difficult because there's nothing that looks spectacularly congruous with your L4, like with that wall of yours, but I still think there's a sort of right place to play. And also a right thing to do with this influence in some relevant sense. Dive into the right side. Yeah, that's a good instinct. I agree. The move exactly is a little bit hard to figure out. I'm not sure which move I would play concretely, but I would dive in. Yeah, invade seems correct. Yeah. So Q8. Yeah, Q8's definitely the type of idea we're looking at. Yeah. So for black, the spot seems like Q9. So white plays somewhere around it. That's the 9 candidate. Yeah. So yeah, Anti's taking a very simple approach. If black were playing, black would play Q8. So then let's play somewhere around here. That seems like the right plan. Peep the dog. You can start by peeping. You could. You could definitely do that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with peeping. You could start with the peep if you like. It's not 100% clear if black will answer or if black will play R7, but peeping's fine. So I think we're all agreeing, play something on the right side. The right side's really big. If black gets a move there, black's basically starting to make territory there. If we play a move, we can maybe pressure the black stones a little bit because this black group isn't 100%, like it doesn't really have a base. We can prevent black from making territory. It's the last big side on the board. Now I'll show you what white did. So white plays 08. And then black is like, nom, my side. I want my side of the board. And then white's like, fine. And we get to this position. And then white plays, I think it was K10. Yeah. Okay. So what's white thinking here? Let's play psychologist. Because I think I have an idea. Wingen? I don't understand. I have a wall, I must use it! Exclamation mark. Reminds me of the game I lost super recently. N6 open. White thinks this middle territory is my win condition. Yeah, okay, all of you have the right idea. White wants to make points with the wall. And white wants to make points with the wall. One of the quickest ways to lose in Go when you have influence. And this is where we bring in our stock market analogy. White is thinking, I'm ahead, I don't need to do anything to stay ahead. I guess? I mean, yeah, that's also possible. But I think, I'm not sure if white thought that they were ahead or not, but it's pretty clear that they thought that they wanted to use the influence. But now I'm going to talk about stock markets. So, when you buy stocks, you are more or less, whenever you buy anything on the stock market, you're basically making a bet that this will be more valuable in the future than it was when you bought it. And this might mean I'm going to buy now and sell later at a higher price. Or it means I can actually keep this, like, I don't know, for example, a share in a company, and I'm actually going to get my money back from the company directly. Or I'm going to sell it for a higher price, etc. It's basically an investment. And I have talked about influence as an investment before. And I want to make a specific analogy to the stock market because of the first point, which I'm going to call faith. Economics 101 Pog. Yeah, I study some economics, which, yeah, I'm not super good at it, but, you know, I've done high school economics. Is this financial advice? No, this is not financial advice. This is Go advice. Yeah. So the problem with stocks, though, okay, so a very simplified model of how a stock market crashes as a whole, but like the whole market crashes, prices start to go down, the value of everything like magically seems to drop, recession, like people lose jobs, etc. One of the simplified models of why that happens is that people lose faith in it. So if people keep participating in the stock market and like buying shares in companies and making investments because they trust that prices will go up, that drives up demand, and that will actually cause prices to increase. And that faith that the stock market will go up is why the stock market goes up. The way a crash happens is that everyone is like, oh, I don't trust the value of my stocks anymore. I want my cash now. I want to sell now. Everything I have, I'm selling it now to get hard, solid cash. Everyone does that, and the value of the stock market plummets. And that's more or less what White's doing here. White made a huge investment, which is this H3 wall. Like, you give Black like 10 points on your side of the board, right? This kind of looks like something that belonged to White, just to, like, White has definitely higher prospects than Black in this area. And Black invades. White gives Black 10 points in exchange for White getting this really nice wall. And the analogy is that White just loses absolute faith in this ever being useful in the future and tries to cash out immediately. And in the process, sadly, White gave up the entire right side. And how much cash will this influence turn into? Not much, which we can see in a few short moves. So Black played H11, White defends at J10, which further like shows the mindset White's in, right? White's like, I'm at least keeping this box of territory. This is mine. Then Black Hanes, and White tries to keep everything, and then Black jumps, and White will have to play here. And then what is White's influence worth? Well, this corridor of like a little bit over 10 points, which isn't really comparable, for example, to what Black made on the right side. So finally, White sold too early. The influence becomes territory, and when your influence becomes territory, that's often a bad sign, as unintuitive as that may seem. So, okay, let's go back. What should White have done? Well, we talked about it a little bit. The right side's the biggest side on the board. Let's do that. Let's play there. So, as White, I would probably play something like Q9. And the idea is I'm going to invade the right side, I'm going to make a group there, and Black won't make points there either. And maybe Black will, I'm guessing Black would cap. That seems like a reasonable way to go. Because you're trying to get this group out, and you're trying to oppress the White stone. Then White would play, like, maybe Q11, and try to settle. And one would ask, well, what's my influence worth now? What's this stock worth now? What am I doing with it? And it's a little bit unclear because you don't really see how it's making points. Whereas in the game, you do see how it's making points, which I think is why White played the way that they did in the game. And that's the problem a lot of people have with influence, which is that the value is uncertain and delayed. It's worth not dying, XD. Well, I'd be curious to hear you elaborate on that. I think I probably agree with you. You are devaluing devaluating opponent stocks with yours. Yeah, that's one interesting thing. Let's say if Black had if black had this shape and white didn't have this mega wall, then it would be harder for white to invade. That's true. So it's kind of like if both sides have influence, then they sort of cancel each other out. And one good example of this is that once white invades, and let's say that black caps, white can consider, for example, peeping and cutting, because now white also has influence, so white can cut and attack black. So that's one way that your influence might end up becoming valuable. That's just one example. Another example is, let's say that for some reason you decide that cutting isn't good. Like there's some context in which I'm just making a random sequence where white tries to settle, and these moves aren't necessarily good. It's more of an example sequence. And how would this go? Like, very simplified example. White lives. Let's say white lives. And then black has all of this influence, which is now worth nothing because white also has their own influence. So they sort of just even out. I'm giving some examples of how white's influence is useful, even if you don't go rushing to sell all of your influence immediately. And that's something people have trouble with, but it's a really important skill when playing for influence. It's also good for understanding influence in general, whether you are playing with or against influence. When your opponent, say you're playing against someone who plays influence, and they really, really want to turn it into points really quickly, you don't need to stop them, usually. And that's why the first big point that I want to make is basically have faith in the stock market. That's like a good starting point for not having it collapse. When you have influence, the moment you lose faith in your influence and you're like, well, I need to make points with this, I don't know what it's worth, I need to make it now, then the value of your influence is usually going to drop very quickly. Now on to our sponsor. Yeah. Faith doesn't bring bread to the table. Yeah, that's the problem. So I'm going to talk about why just being confident in your influence being useful, why that's an incomplete model. Like, the lecture isn't ending here. This is just the prerequisite to playing Moyo and using influence well is being confident that it's worth something. But it's not the only thing you need to use it well. So, for example, your behavior around influence changes. How do we inside trade to make some points? We're taking the analogies a bit far now. Yeah. So, I'll give an example. So in this sequence we showed where I was talking about what if white plays q7 and cuts to try and also attack black, because here it sort of looks like white's under attack because white's the one who's enclosed, and then white's like, no, you're also under attack, you have to worry, and then we discuss who's weaker, and then this wall of whites is obviously useful in that discussion because it's cramping black's group in. So white's behavior has to change because of this influence. So if we had invaded in like this type of position where white's influence is a little bit less strong, then we wouldn't be cutting this way. I don't think that would be particularly interesting because, for example, black could attach at 04 and threaten to hane at n3 or threaten to capture the stone. Black can live in the corner. So black has so many more options. So our behavior has to change around our moyo, right? You can't just pretend, you can't just go about your day being like, la 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 la, my influence is valuable. It will naturally be valuable. I don't have to do anything with it ever. Right? That isn't what I mean by confidence. What I mean by confidence is that you should be confident that there will be a way to use the influence, which doesn't mean that it will use itself. So that's why just having blind faith is a little bit incomplete as a model, because it doesn't tell you, well, how am I going to use the influence in this context? What is it going to be worth? When do I sell my stocks, and how do I sell them? Right? You can't just keep your stocks and be like, yeah, the stock market is going to go up all the time. I don't care. I don't even look at how much my like shares are worth this particular time. Yeah. So I lost the first 40 minutes. Yeah. So if you lost the first 40 minutes, the VOD's available on Twitch and it will also be uploaded on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. So that's one limitation. Having faith or confidence in it being useful, your influence, doesn't mean that you know how to use it. Disadvantage 2. Just because you know it's valuable doesn't mean you know how valuable it is. And I think, and for that, I want to bring us to another example, which is which game? I need to find it. Where are you? Where are you? I think I may have accidentally not uploaded. Oh yeah, okay. Where are you? Okay, the game in question isn't here. I made a mistake. I'll just upload it. 1 second. Usually I have all of the games I want to discuss in one file, and I somehow accidentally didn't do that. I have to find it again, sadly. Okay, yeah, there it is. Influence lets you be territorial elsewhere. Influence is there to back you up after you overplay. Yeah, those are all good summaries of, well, good examples of ways that your influence might be useful in the future. Influence is good because you get to be more territorial later. Exactly. So I want to show this game quickly. Played by a student of mine, and they told me something really interesting after the game, which I guess we'll get to. So, this is the first rather odd moment in the game. Black Tanuki'd, probably thinking that they're alive. This is how it came up. Yeah. So some of you have seen this before because we've discussed this position in the Nordic Dojo Discord. We have a Discord server, where we discuss stuff. We have like Sumego's games, etc. Yeah. I'm sorry, browser. Your games are really featuring this time around. So Black Tanuki. Okay. Full disclaimer: this game was played on an airplane after a 2-week Go Congress. The players were tired. We're not here for the quality. We're here for the philosophy. So So Black Tanuki's at Q6, probably thinking that he was alive in the corner because White Han is at A2. And we play B5. Black seems alive technically. Oof, very technically. Are we sure the Black's alive after B5? Because that's... I don't quite see it, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure how Black lives. Hane first line. Hane first line? Hane first line, I'm not fully confident I agree with you. Somehow. Yeah. Even if White jumped, I still don't see what Black's up to. Ooh, that way you could get a Ko. You could get a Ko because you can Ko like this. So anyway, okay, a Ko would also not be great. So Black died. let's say whatever the correct result is, black died. And black died this way. So white, black basically threatens the cut and prevents white from connecting under the stones. White starts taking liberties, black cuts, and white keeps taking liberties, and now black's dead. And we had a very interesting discussion on the Nordic Go Dojo Discord about this position, because the AI evaluation is sort of unintuitive. People can guess if they like in the chat. You can also explain why you think what you think. You don't have to give it in terms of AI evaluation. You can be like, black's better, white's better, this is why. You can also just say nothing and I'll tell you, but like what the position's like right now. But the result's sort of interesting, and how you evaluate this game is also sort of interesting to me. Blind guess Q6 was fine. Q6? Okay. I'd be that's a reasonable blind guess. I'd like to hear an let's say in more detail why you think that. White is a lot better. If AI says black's better, I quit Go now. White's better because white 8 stones, but not much better because the rest of the board is black. Okay. So there we're already starting to get Papasnik has the closest opinion to what we discussed this position a lot in the Discord server, and we reached a conclusion, and Papasnik's getting there, I would say. So white is better, but white's not much better. Spoiler alert, the AI evaluation is white +2, which yeah, white plus 5 to 10. Yeah, so Antti, the professional player who runs the Nordic Go Dojo, he's also in chat. Maybe he's not in chat anymore, but he was earlier. And he guessed white +5. And apparently it's white +2. Still here. Hi, Antti. Filling in territory, ending in gote, etc., etc. Yeah. So, yeah, white +2, Jesus, exactly. That's why this is a funny position. One of the reasons I wanted to share this is that it's really interesting. So, let's talk about this. So, black has this group, which black could live with. And you could spend a move to live with it. 5 was my guess too, then I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I mean, 5's a reasonable guess, I think. It's really a shock to just lose your stones like this and just get killed. So I expect some human bias. 5 to me is a very good human estimate. It's a good compromise between you feeling bad that you lost your group and still being somewhat cold-blooded in analyzing the position. But let's talk about it. So black tanukis. And white spends a move to kill. The killing move might have been a mistake. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Possibly white could have killed more optimally, but I don't see it necessarily. So let's see. So white spent a move. How many more moves does white have in this area? So we can actually do this the dumb way, which is by counting how many stones there are in this convoluted big corner, or instead we can count how many stones other players have on the rest of the board. So black has 6 and white has 2. So white has and white just played, so both sides have the same amount of stones. White has 4 more stones in this corner, which already makes this less appealing than before. Like before, you're like, well, everything died. White killed everything. Shouldn't that be really nice? However, you can consider this as, well, this is sort of like if black had this corner enclosure and then got to add like 2 more moves to it. And you could argue that the lower left corner is better for white than the lower right corner is better for black. but it's already starting to get sort of comparable in terms of the size of the territory, how influential it is. So it doesn't look that bad. And additionally, there's a weird thing that white did in order to kill these stones. So beforehand, white was really strong. White basically has a wall that's rock solid. Black can't even cut at A because white... okay. The net very technically doesn't work, but if black cuts at A, like, later, it's very arguable that black is weaker than white is. So the cut is, like, a little bit weakening, but white's still in general just really strong. Black has the co-thread advantage. That's the type of thing I wouldn't really think about much, because co-threats don't seem to matter that much in the game. But yeah, it matters a bit. It matters a bit. That reminds me, someone could investigate on the value of co-threats at some point or another. Maybe with some AI, but yeah, that's homework for the audience. So white used to have this really strong outside, and when we kill, we gain how many points? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ish. I mean, these aren't really points because we're gonna have to eventually capture the black stones. So we gain 5 points. Then we gain how many stones? 9 stones, which is 18 points. And that's 18 points plus 5. That's 23 points, plus the points that you took from black, which is about like 3 or 4 points. So overall, you're making about 26 points in cash. And 26 points in cash is not that big at the beginning of the game. Like, if we use, in the counting system that I use, so if we take the difference between white playing b5 and black just having defended, the difference is 26 points or so. That's actually the value of a move. That's the value of the first move. And okay, white maybe got stronger because white took all of these black stones and connected everything. But white also maybe paradoxically got a bit weaker because now these stones have liberty problems. So everything's sente for black. Like, this is sente, this is sente. There's all kinds of things that, like, forcing moves that black can use. Ideally, black might later, like, double hane or something. And white can't really cut because black connects under in this really ugly way. So therefore, white might be forced to just go back, and then black can make territory on the left side if they really want to. So white also gave something up, which is relevant. Chat had some things to mention. The value of co-threats depends on the game, but I do remember that having absolute co-threats early in the game actually has pretty tangible value. I talked about it with Ohashi7p about it at one point. 1 point per super threat. Wow. Out of a co, I think up to 4. During a co, priceless. I mean, depends on the co. Personally, I'm a big fan of losing codes and still having a better position. But, you know, having codes is certainly useful. Like, or depending on the types of co-threats. If you have co-threats that you can play without making your position worse, that's pretty valuable. Like, co-threats that are big that don't make your position worse. And these are good examples because black can just play like e8, hane, double hane, and they're all threats, and they don't really make black's position worse. They're fine. So yeah, maybe at some point someone could do a like estimate on how much an estimate on how much codes are worth using AI or something. That would be really cool. Man, that sounds like a good like blog post or something. But anyway, getting back to this position, we sort of conclude that black's fine. That white's move is barely worth more than a normal early game move. What happened in the game? Well, in the game, black felt terrible. Like, black told me that, oh, I died with something, I just felt like I'm really behind and worse. And black played crazy all game to try and recover a lead that white never had. And I think that that's probably the main reason Black ended up losing this game. I mean, this game is also, it's, like I said, it's an airplane game. It was played on an airplane. It's hardly the most, seriously played game ever. Black won this game. Wait, Black won this game? Oh, yes, you did win this game. Oh, Jesus, yeah, sorry. Okay. Black actually ended up winning this game. Wait. I hallucinated this. I think it's because I seem to remember that Black lost this game because your position got worse at some point. Browser's Black in this game. Excuse me. I seem to remember Black's position was really bad at some point, or like at least got worse. But yeah. Congratulations on winning this. I'm wondering how surprised you were if you thought you were losing all game and then suddenly you won. But the reason I brought up this game is that there's a lot of intangible value that Black got out of this corner. The value that White gets is very tangible. I just got 26 points. Easy. I got the value of a move. Great. White's happy. Black, on the other hand, got Sente, got a move, which a lot of people forget about. Like, I think if you're... This is my guess. After Black got killed at B4, Black wasn't really like, yes, I got Sente. Black was probably busy being sad because he died. So, that's not, let's say, that's, yeah, you tend to forget little details like Sente, which are actually very valuable. Additionally, Black's other forms of profit are like all of the Sente moves that Black has. Like this move. I mean, you should probably start with the Haneha, like this. Because if you start with E8, White might play here, and then you have no more Sente moves. Almost. So you might start with like double Hane or something. Not quite sure about the move order. This looks like a move order. I don't mind this. Yeah. But anyway, the other intangible value that Black has are these Sente moves. So Black has Sente moves. Ooh, that's sort of intangible. So I understand Black being a little bit sad here and feeling like they're behind. And one thing I asked Black after the game is, well, did you judge the game here? And like, did you actually stop and make an evaluation? Because when we stop and make an evaluation, I think it's reasonably clear that Black isn't doing that badly. And the answer was not really. And the reasoning was very interesting. So my student mentioned that especially when they play influence, when they have intangible value can be a lot of different things. Like, you have influence, your opponent has weak groups, you have some obscure Sente moves that you can use. You can figure out how much your influence needs to make in order to be worth this territory. So White, we already established that White has like nearly 30 points on the lower left. Because White gained quite a few points, and additionally White already had some points on the lower side. So we sort of know that Black needs to make 30 extra points on the rest of the board. But thinking in those terms actually can put pressure on you. Like, if you have influence and your opponent has territory, and you're like, well, I need to make back X points by the end of the game, that puts pressure on you, and you're not sure if your influence is worth it. And yeah, you're not sure how you can use your influence, and you feel like you're on a timer. And that puts a lot of pressure on you, and that's very hard to deal with. So my student's solution is actually just to have faith. Like, they make influence, and then they have experience, lots of experience of playing Moyo games, and then the Moyo usually becomes useful. But when actually evaluating the game, it's easy to become anxious about whether your stocks are like valuable enough. So that's understandable, but it also means that you're not evaluating the game, which is important. Like, if you're playing a game of Go, having a good idea of what the board looks like then you're gonna make worse decisions. Like, for example, here, if Black had made a thorough estimate of how the game is, maybe he wouldn't have felt as desperate as he did. So that's, yeah. But not making this estimate basically makes Black play in a certain way that's less optimal. Have faith and hodl? What's hodl? Somebody explain. Somebody used that in chat earlier, and I was like, I don't know what that is. But yeah. And this is, to me, serves to illustrate what the problem is with just playing with faith or confidence in your intangible value without having heuristics to evaluate it. You can't... If you can't evaluate, you're gonna make mistakes. Oh, please, someone explain. Is it hodl? Hodi? It says, yeah, someone explain, please. Pronunciation included. And what I wanted to try and touch on a little bit is I wanted to try and give some ideas on how you can start to evaluate influence, both as someone who's playing influence or playing against it, or other types of intangible value, like a weak group or something, without getting scared, let's say. Hodl is a Bitcoin meme about holding Bitcoin and not selling. Ah, I see. Yeah. Yeah, I see. That makes sense. I might look it up later. It sounds fun. So also applies to other stocks. Memes about any stocks, crypto, I guess. Diamond. Never sell, wait for the price to go to the moon. I see. That sort of makes sense. So with influence, you can kind of hodl for a long time. For a longer time than most people hodl. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Because usually your influence finds a way to be useful eventually. But you do have to cash it out at some point. And this is why I want to present a model of influence that I like to think. I like to think in these terms, and I hope that they might be useful. If someone were to teach about faith in Moyos, that would be Oscar. The king of screw AI and let's build. I mean, I don't screw AI that much. I'm like down like 2 or 3 points in AI usually when I build my Moyos. It's not that bad. It's a little bad. So the model that I want to present is basically when you get influence, you're buying up a bunch of stocks. And these stocks are in themselves uncertain. So you don't really know how much it's going to turn into, but you've bought a bunch of stock. And then a good example of this might be like and actually I'll just go into my last example game, I think, for the purpose of this. And it's interesting that Kataplixi mentioned, I love your selling your games in the finals in Romania. Thank you. I didn't get to the finals, but I did play in the European Championship. And I wanted to show the beginning of one of my games there. Because I have been playing... I played hard influence that tournament. I mean, I'm just back from the tournament. It's like a week ago. And this is my game against one of the European professionals. And this got me into the quarterfinals. Spoiler alert, I won it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how one can invest in stock really hard in the beginning of the game. This isn't the game. I think this is the game. And then you can try to... Hard influence is an understatement. Yeah. I sort of went for it. And then throughout the game, you're trading your stocks for money. Little by little by little. Against Tongi. Yeah, this is my game against Tongi. So the basic concept is, at the beginning of the game, you buy up a bunch of stock. I'm black this game. And let's just see the beginning of the game, where I just keep buying stocks. I don't stop this game. I just buy forever. And this is why playing Dongi is actually really fun for me, because one of the reasons is that I seem to win. Like, he's a better player than I am by every objective metric, but I always win when we play for some reason. So that's one reason I like playing him. But additionally, it's a stylistic clash because he really likes taking cash, really likes taking points, and I really like taking influence. So our games are always really polarized, and this is a good example of that. So he plays L18, I play N16, and I keep building. And yeah, I even take Gote here, which I don't have to, just to make my shape even more solid. And I think for these first 40 moves, I've basically invested. Like, I have a bunch of high uncertain stones, and he has 50 points in cash. You should have listened to Ilya's comments on Twitch. Yeah, I'd wonder what he'd have to say about that. I guess he thought I was worse at some point. He can think that if he likes, I guess. So far, I have bought lots and lots of stocks. I'm not an influence player, but I like black here. Yeah, I thought the game was fine for me. I certainly liked it for me because I like playing influence, but I also thought white probably likes white here because Dongi likes territory. So we're just playing our game. We're both playing our game. I love black here. Okay. The game's actually even in AI. So white's even a tiny bit better, I think. So yeah, but I also like black. But I think we can generally agree. Time to jump in. In fact, he did jump in. He actually played N10. And white has the easier game plan. Yeah. So this is when we talk a little bit about how to sell your stocks, because I make this huge investment. I have this huge like bowl of territory. Not territory, that's a Freudian slip. Influence. It's not my territory yet. And all of the stones are high. Like I have like I have 5 stones on move 41. I have 5 stones below the 4th line, which is pretty funny. And he has 50 points. And by the end of the game, I need to have traded in my stocks for 50 points worth of money. Almost. I mean, I have a little bit of cash in the corner, like around T17. So something like this. And I have to find ways of trading out my influence throughout the game. And we're going to talk about like how I think about that a little bit as an example. White has the easier game plan. Easier game plan, reduce invade, but harder to implement successfully. Okay, I'm gonna make a guess, or I'm gonna make a conjecture. Playing against influence is simple, but it's not easy. Like, white's plan here is to just invade and create a group here at this point. Like, white has to. White doesn't really have another game plan right now. White just invades. That's simple, but it's not easy, because white's gonna start getting attacked, and white's going to suffer. Conversely, black's plan is not simple because you have lots of different options. Intangible value, there are many ways to turn intangible value into tangible value. There's many ways to turn all of this influence into points eventually. And that's, in that sense, that's easy because you have all of the control and you get to decide a lot of things about the game when you have influence. That's what I like. You have a lot of different paths to making all of those points you need to make by the end of the game. It's not simple because there's many different ways to do it and you don't really know which way to do it. So I hope that's I just thought of this now. I didn't prepare this, but I have this idea in my head that playing influence is actually kind of, in a relevant way, it's easy because I have all the control. Yeah. Whereas for my opponent, they have a simple plan, but it's really hard to implement because they're getting attacked all the time. So he plays N10. And this was an interesting moment for me because this is already the type of situation where you can think about cashing out and just playing something like Q11 and saying, well, I'm making some points on the right side and I still have some influence. Like, this stone of whites reduces my influence, but I have increased my territory. So that means I have a little bit more money and my stocks are worth a little bit less. I've already cashed out a bit. And you could do that. There's nothing wrong with that. You could even play something like P10 or P11 and claim that you're even making a little bit more territory than if you were playing Q11. But that's not necessarily how I play. I hit the invest button. Yeah, so I invested harder. And one of the reasons I did this is that I didn't really see a good move for white. So I keep building influence. This should be valuable somehow. Like, my stocks should still be valuable. I just have more of them now. And white has to figure out what to do with this stone. And I didn't see, like, a super easy way for white to handle the stone. For example, M5, M5, M5. Oh, yeah. The true one knows, yeah. I thought that white might do something like P10, P12, and I'd play Q11. And in that sense, I'm basically forcing white to give me some points. Because in order to make shape, white has to give me these points. And I thought something like that would be okay for me. Instead, white played P11. And the idea of P11 is basically the same as O10. Sorry, O10, P10. But giving me a little bit less, a slightly harder time making territory. Let's say it's less easy than just pushing and like just making nobbies all the time. And here I have a couple of options. One of them is R11, which is again trading out stocks for points. And I considered this, and I don't know what chat would think about such a move. I had a reason I didn't play it, and I had a reason I played something else. Basically, this is this is one heuristic I'm using because I have a lot of experience playing influence, relatively speaking. And I say, well, if I have this Mega Moyo, then I definitely shouldn't be playing that submissively. Like, this is making some territory, but it's also like, it's like I don't have this influence. So having faith in this influence means using it somehow. It doesn't just mean letting it sit there. So I want to attack somehow. Peep this shape, N12. Yeah, N12 is a good idea. Just cut. Yeah, so we have some barbarians in the chat that just want to cut. I considered cutting. And by cutting, I mean something ridiculous like this. Like, really, like, really barbaric. There's no better word for it. It's barbaric. And I thought that sadly just helps white settle quickly because my shape is broken. Like, even something very simple like this, white just settles with almost with territory on the right side. But the peeps are a good idea, yes. So basically now I want to put pressure on white. I'm the one with the power, and I want to coerce white into giving me stuff. And whereas in some of our earlier examples, people have influence and are hurrying to sell their influence quickly for points, I don't like doing that because I think that devalues it. So I'm thinking about the peeps. I'm thinking about pressuring white. So I actually thought about O9 and N12. Yeah. N12 I considered. I had a reason I didn't play it, but I'm sure it's an okay move. I think it was something like... I think I was concerned about white peeping here. But wait, why was I concerned about that? Okay, yeah. So if I hane... Now I have an issue because if I connect and white just makes a bamboo shape, white shape is really solid. I don't really see what I'm achieving. And if I wedge, which is sort of the obvious move, I thought that white has a relatively easy time making nice shape, and it's unclear what A is doing there. Yeah. I think next I would probably play Q11? But yeah, that just gives white a lot of shape. Like, White's making so much eye shape just by existing right now. I don't like this for black. Maybe here. So that's why I didn't play N12. But I did play 09. And 09 just has the idea of creating a cutting point and putting white under some pressure. And usually, maybe white wouldn't, like, on an empty board, white wouldn't mind this cut. On an empty board, white would even fight. And this is just some normal running cutting fight, where everyone has weak groups. The problem for white is that this is what the board looks like. So white can't really do that, which is worth noting. So how does white deal with this? Well, white could defend the shape somehow, something like this jump. And then I was probably considering playing just N9 push, which sort of threatens a Hane, or just playing R11 now. And the idea of R11 at this point, and I want to emphasize this, I'm cashing out some points, because this is basically becoming my territory now. But almost more importantly, I'm taking white's base. And that's one of the nice things about playing influence. You're progressively making territory out of your influence, little by little. But you hopefully are also maintaining the usefulness of your influence in that process. So ideally, I would maybe peep here even first, just to let white know, hey, your group is weak and heavy, and it has no eyes, and I'm making points. That's the idea. And even though I have a little bit less influence now, I have a little bit more cash. And you basically do that the whole game. Slowly, you trade out your stocks. And at the end of the game, you've hopefully done this like balancing game well enough that you're up on points. That's the basic concept. So white actually chose to play R11 because, as he put it, he really put this in a nice way. He wants to touch the ground. And touch the ground means he wants to have stones on the third line, because then it's really easy to make eye shape with A and B. Browser says, the thing here is, I feel like if all of black's potential turns into straight points, black would be behind unless some extra invisible points appear. Surprising amount of feels one has to employ when using influence. Yeah, because the value is intangible, yes. But I think if we just employ feel, it's easy to get scared. So I also want to hopefully give some idea of how you approach this stock trading game in a more rational way. If you just feel your way through it, it's harder than if you've set up some heuristics for thinking about it. So feeling and experience is really important, but you need to have some ways of evaluating things a little bit more objectively to play optimally. And I want to talk about that a little bit if I can. Yeah, so Browser makes a good point. Black's potential isn't just passively going to turn into points. You have to use it, yeah. Do you think about using M5 somehow in this fight? Like to aim to drive white there, or is it just useful for later profit? M5, in my opinion, M5 is just a pass. I'm making influence. I'm playing a move that is a normal big move, and it will be useful later. Yeah, I didn't really put much thought into it. Later in the game, it did become useful, because after white played on the third line to touch the ground, I cut. And white gave up the stone for the reasons we discussed. And that's the type of concession influence can get you. If you cut something, you're an advantage in a fight, for example. But that also means you have to play actively. You have to look for those opportunities, which is why I think this peep is a much better move than just playing R11. So white pushed a bunch of times and then played O13. I remember thinking that, say white plays S9 or something, I was very seriously considering peeping and cutting, which is another example of my influence being particularly useful and me being able to get away with things that black shouldn't be. Like usually cuts like this aren't good, just shape-wise. But if you're strong enough, they might be good sometimes. And white understood that, I think, so white defended with O13. And I'm gonna keep investing. Though, okay, this investment setting up a specific payoff. Yeah. So it's not that much of an investment. I played O16. And O16 is basically a dame. Because, I mean, it's not making points. But I'm basically valuing this connection that white has between his stones. That's the idea. And for the moment, it gets me nothing. Because it's not even clear if white's, like, is white dead with either group? Like, what if white just Tanukis, which is what he did? Can I kill either one of the groups? Probably not. So what am I getting? And this is one of the benefits of playing long time setting games. I calculated the game position in a few, what happened in about 15 moves. I sort of saw this design. So I'm okay with playing a slow move like this because I see the follow-up. But I mostly want to talk about the result of this. So I play this O16 investment. And, okay, J18. J18 is basically Sente because I cut the white stone. And shortly, if white does nothing, then probably going down is pretty lethal for the white group. Should I play? I think possibly I should play here and here. That's, or even more brutal. Here. And then white's a bit dead, I think. So that was the idea. So okay, I played this in Sente, which incidentally is one of the payoffs of playing O16, because white needs to defend. And now I started attacking the right side group. And I'll just show the sequence, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. And I actually don't want to look at all of this game. I just want to look at this part. Yeah, here. So yeah, P16 is an interesting move, I thought, because it's another dame, but it's actually a double threat, in a sense. So if white defends the top side, I will peep, and I will play N14, and I will kill this group. Now I'm not playing around, I will kill this group. That was my intention anyway. Even if I don't kill it, I'll profit by attacking, but the plan was to kill it. And my opponent agreed. So he played N14. And then I get to worm into the top side. Because now that I've taken both of these liberties, white has an issue. And the issue is that if white hanes, I get to play S19, and this is at least a ko shape for the whole top side, which I thought was okay for black. I also thought he might do this. I thought that was okay for him, but that was the plan. And instead, he plays S19, and I choose to trade. So say that I just defend at T18. This same sequence is now worse for me because I can't go down at S19. So I have to play this ko, which is much worse. So I trade. I hane, he takes the stone. And this is the end of the part of the game I want to talk about. How many points does black have, would you say? According to chat, how many points does black have here? And also, how many points does white have? That's irrelevant. Like, what is the solid territory score? I'll count 2. Black has a bit under 30. Around 45. Oof. I sense different counting systems. So I would say white 50, black 40. So I would say these are the points I'm counting for black. So this is 15 plus 2, 15 plus 2 is 17. Then you can kind of count like 2 here, and you could count these guys here in terms of like actually solid cash that white can never take from you. And if you're feeling optimistic, you can count this stone too. I don't see more cash for black. Cash in the literal sense of these are just points that white will never take from me. If you're counting like black is leading, do we think black is leading this game? 17, 27. So I count black 30 points in totally solid cash, which yeah, some people are counting 40. I'm not sure where the 40 comes from. Like for me, it's possible that some of you are making what I call an influence conversion. So you look at black's influence and you're like, oh yeah, these will probably turn into points or something. And I don't really like to count like that. I count in solid cash and then adjust for influence. And left side, I said 5. Yeah, I count 0 for that. I just count it as influence. And of course, people use different counting systems. I'm not saying my system's better. But it's interesting because that's the thing with intangible value. People have different ways to count it. Some people try and make a conversion of how many points they think it's worth. Some people just count the solid cash and then think, well, how many points, like, do I think that this influence will be worth the like difference? How do you count white top left? I count it as influence. I don't actually count it as territory because I think I can invade it if I really want to. I gave h16, g16, h16, g16, q5, q6. I see. I see. So I think that we can all use different counting systems, but we'll probably come to similar conclusions. So I'm counting the white top left as influence, not as territory. So I hope that gives a perspective on why I don't think either side has many points. You can use whichever counting system you like, so long as you're consistent. For now, I will say that from my perspective, black has a tiny bit over 30. White has 15 on the lower side, 10 on the lower right, lower left 15, lower right 10. You have like 3 points over here. You have 1, 2, yeah, you have 3 points, 4 points over there. And you have Komi. Now, the value of a move in the middle game is roughly Komi, so we can cancel the value of Komi with it being black's turn, because it is black's turn. And we can say white has about 7 points, and then plus 25, so white has about 32 points in cash. And then black has about 30 points in cash as well. We forget Komi because it's black's turn. They sort of cancel out. And then black has some influence over here. And then white has some influence in the corner. Who's better? I don't know. But what I want to point out is that there's a reason I was happy at this point. And I don't even know if I'm better. I mean, I know I'm better because I looked at AI and AI said that I'm up a couple of points here, though it's only a couple of points. I think I'm a tiny bit better according to AI, but that's not the point. The reason I'm happy is that all this time ago, when I built all of this influence, I thought, well, I need to sell this in some way at some point. And that's the model I want to present. You can think of your influence as these stocks that you can trade off throughout the game. And by the end of the game, you will have traded all of them because there will only be points on the board. And ideally, you want to trade them little by little throughout the game. Like, you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself to make all of your influence into points at the very end of the game, because influence is actually, it kind of depreciates throughout the game. It becomes less and less valuable as like groups become settled, and as the board becomes clearer, as uncertainty goes down, your influence loses value. So you don't want to procrastinate on actually turning your influence into points. On the other hand, you don't want to lose faith in your influence and just get scared and trade it off all early and have no patience at all. And that's a weird balance, which is sort of hard to keep. But the sort of the model I want to present is you can keep an eye on how much your influence needs to cash out for in the future. And